ever seen the movie Blindside? The Blindside. It's a movie of a real-life drama of Michael O'Hare. He was a really big kid and grew up on the streets of Memphis. And by God's grace, he was adopted by a wonderful couple, a family very different from him. His mother was a mama bear. She watched out for him. And well, if you've never seen this movie, I don't want to ruin it for you, but let me just give you kind of the Reader's Digest version this morning. So his high school football coach saw no use for him because since he was a big kid, but he was too passive to use his strength to hurt people. But the mama bear saw something in him the coach didn't. So, Michael, and so the minute the coach put Michael on the blind side of the quarterback to protect him, Michael flourished. This led to a stellar career in the NFL. What would have happened if his mom hadn't seen him for who he really was? He probably would have listened to his high school coach, believed he was a terrible football player, and quit. But imagine the story. So imagine that story if he never really found out his true identity as a football player. The reality is we all have a similar story. Somewhere along the line, some well-meaning coach, teacher, parent, or classmate misidentified our identity and we believe them. Some of you right now had a mama bear or other angel in life who saw your true identity and helped you discover it. That was one thing I really enjoyed about Bible college. I grew up, God told me I was called to be a missionary to the Northwest and have a ministry at Northwest. And as a kid, because my mom kind of helped play a part of this, she goes, "Oh, Northwest, like Washington area, right?" And so as a kid, I went, "Yeah, sure, Washington area." Never thought about Alaska. Wasn't even on my radar. But in Bible school, let me brag on my school a little bit. The Terminal University is an interdenominational school, and it's known for their engineering. Some stuff from LaTerno Inc. is still used in Alaska all over the place, especially like up in the mines. You go up to Fort Knox and those big dump trucks, they're so big they got to power power them with a motor on like each wheel. They're massive. Well, the engineers that designed that's from LaTerno Inc., which is part of where my school came from because RG LaTerno was all earth movers, and that's where we got to start. And so one of the cool things from the very conception of the school is that the RG wanted all of his graduates to have a biblical foundation, regardless of their career. Partly because he recognized that missionaries don't have to be pastors. They can be engineers that go out and design wells and do some different stuff. And so right from the beginning of the LaTerno Institute, they had to get these Bible part of this biblical foundation. So every single student, regardless of degree, takes biblical foundations, which if this was an AG school, we call it hermeneutics. But it was more just hermeneutics. It was also who am I in my walk for Christ. Every student had to take biblical literature, which was a one-semester survey of the Bible. That's a lot of reading. Because we went through the entire Bible cover to cover, plus a textbook in a semester, and just got this great big picture of what the Bible is. And you have to take 2 upper-level Bible classes. It's not just required for every student. It's just really cool how they did that. And so in my first semester, and I knew this call in my life, and I really started praying about it, and I really felt God saying, something similar where my professor said, don't just listen to other people who said, pray about it, go into it. And I started realizing that, God's called me to Alaska. And so I started looking into Alaska, looking at mission trips to Alaska. How could I get to Alaska? And so, I started school in the fall of 2004, 2006 is when I first set foot in the state. And so it was that little by little, if I listened to my mother, who was very well-intentioned, did not want her baby to move all the way to Alaska, I probably never would have stepped foot here. I would have lost part of my identity. But by following the urgings of this professor, because they sense in you something that you do not, some potential, some part of God's plan. So it's important to have that. And maybe, I see a lot of gray hairs in here. Maybe you're at the point where you're looking at some other people and you get to be that person to coach them along, seeing potential in your sons and daughters and the people that you've worked with that they don't see. So you get to coach them along, you get to cheerlead, or maybe you're getting ready to just go on a whole new adventure all by yourself. You never know what God's got in store. And so, but here's the thing, you're meant for more, but the mirages in the mirror is keeping you from it. The voice in your head is saying you're not good enough, that can't be you, who do you think you are to dream that dream? But what if you were destined for more? Fashioned for greatness, created for a higher purpose. This is one of the oldest and most perpetual questions of humankind. Who am I? Who am I? It is a core question of every philosophy, of every religion, because it is the relentless question of every individual. Who am I? So if you have your Bibles, I want you to open it to the very, very, very beginning. I'll also put it on the screen to Genesis 1:26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And let him have dominion over the flesh of the sea, over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." Now I want you to notice I got a couple things highlighted on the screen for you. And so there's three words that these are key for us to understanding your identity that God has given you, that God has created you with a purpose. So we have the words us, image, and dominion. So if you want in your Bible, you can circle that there as we go along. So we're going to start right here with let us make man in our image. Okay? And so Genesis 1:26 is one of the most curious and most important verses in the Bible, because up until this point, creation was created. Boom, God said it, Jesus built it, Holy Spirit brought life to it, and it flourished. But then God stops at day 7 and says, let us make man in our own image. And so the God of the Bible from the very beginning is describing himself as a community. Let us. The God from the Bible, out of the Bible from the very beginning. And so theologians have come to call this the Trinity. Fun fact for you, the word Trinity is never found in the Bible. It's something that we've applied to the Bible to understand it. So we're never going to fully understand all the mechanics of it, but the basic idea is simple. A single God with three multiple personalities. But that now sounds like he has a disorder. But it's three people in one. It's kind of like if you're going to ride your tricycle and you're missing a wheel, well, that's missing a part of the Godhead. So you want the 3 in 1. I wish you had a banana with me. If you take a banana, go home, open it up, you just want to peel off the top, take your pinky, and slowly push it to the middle. What you're going to find is that in that banana, there's 3 pieces in one. So it's kind of the way God is. I could do another example. I was a kids pastor. I got examples. Take an egg. One egg, 3 parts. The shell, the yolk, and the white. 3 in 1. So this is kind of how God is, and he's that 3 in 1. But we're never on this earth going to truly understand the Trinity. Sorry. That's just the way it is. It won't be until we meet God, we see how this 3 in 1 works, that we're going to understand it. Nonetheless, it's critical for us to embrace it for another reason. The number one reason I want to focus on, there we go. The number one reason I want to focus on right now is the communal nature of God. Let us. I know it's kind of a crazy thing, but we sense the break. We all sense the breakdown in community. It actually has been studied in a book about the U.S. called Bowling Alone, and they examined the reason and consequences that breakdown of community has happened in America. And that's why so many young people are returning to kind of tribalism, to find their new identity in new groups or new cliques. They're leaving what their parents have said, this is who we are, and we're trying to figure out, who am I today? Don't believe you turn on the news. Right? And you're going to see these people are starting to form new cliques, new identities, new groups, and that they're trying to find something in common. Why? Because we actually need to be in community. It started with God. God himself is community, and he made us to be communal. And we're not merely social cravings. We're actually craving community. By nature, we are more we than me, which is why COVID has been such a hard thing for people, because they were all of a sudden just me or just a small family, but we need more. We weren't just meant to be that small. We're meant to be in that community together. And so, but we live in a culture that is primarily about me. That's how we introduce ourselves. We have a focus on, even if you ask someone to introduce themselves, they might say something like this, so like if it was me, hi, I'm Kory, I'm a pastor. I like hiking and swimming. I have a wife and 2 kids. And on it goes, every sentence starts with what word? I, right? But God created us in and for community. If you go back to biblical times, here we have Simon Peter, son of Zebedee. Just right there, I just labeled community. And so not only have I met who you are, I know your family. I am Jesus of Nazareth, son of Joseph, is how this reading would have gone. Because you are identified with not just you, but who your family is. And so, because God created us in and for community, so our identity, not just our preferences, is communal. Who am I? Well, I'm son. I'm a son, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a friend, I'm a partner, I'm a teammate. Without my relationships, I don't have authentic identity. One of the things that I deal with on a daily basis with people that have come to counseling is they are lacking friendship because they have lost the ability to live in community. And so they come to the one place they know that counselor is going to be there in a relationship no matter what, mostly because you're paying that counselor to do it. There's more to it. I'm not getting paid, but I'm doing the same thing, but there's something there, but it's a very special type of relationship. And so, but it's because people are longing for it. I've talked to different clients, okay, and they'll talk to me for an hour. Man, I'm feeling better. What did I do in that hour? I flat out asked the client that. What did I do? Well, you just listened, okay? Anything else? I could trust you. I knew it wasn't going past you. Why do we have community breakdown? We have trust breakdown. We have relationship breakdown. If we don't have the very basis of trust, then nothing else is going to flow. So if I told Chuck, hey, I'm going through this right now, and I came into church next week and everybody in the church knew about it, not only the church, but the guy in Napa knew about it, and it's a small community, it happens really fast, and that happens a lot. But am I going to go back to Chuck next time and I have a hard thing? No, that trust isn't there. Trust is essential. And I think that's why people call up counselors. They know that, if I break that trust, I can get sued. And so that's one reason why they do it. How awful of a civilization do we live in that in order to trust someone, you got to pay them money and have a contract to get sued if it doesn't happen. We are meant to live in community. We were made by the divine community, and when we lose community, we lose our identity. You wonder why I keep harping on our various gatherings, especially our summer Wednesday night stuff. You might feel it's pointless if you're not doing Bible study. Why do I need to show up? But it's because God created us to be in community. In order for us to grow as a church, we have to have a core set of people that are saying, this is who we are. And that core set can't just stay at 5. It needs to be growing. And that's why it's constantly more people need to be coming in. And it's not about the numbers. It's about growing the community. And so that's why our image is all based around, our identity is based around it. Your best self is when you are known, and is when you know and are known. Our desire is for you to have a full and biblical identity among a group of people who share your goals, aspirations to love God and to love people. So number 2 is, the next one we're going to look at is our image, okay? So God said, let us make man in our image, okay? And so clearly it does not have to, so what does this mean? That we're made in the image of God. Granted, there's a lot of different stuff. It's kind of, again, another thing that's hard to understand. Probably not going to fully get it until we get to heaven. I want to explore some of the various meanings that this might mean. Clearly it's probably not physical. I can look around the room and you know what, Chuck, I don't look anything like you, man. That's an okay thing though, okay? But we're all made in the same image. So it's not a physical image there, except that we all have the same basic parts, legs, arms, and that type of stuff. And so, we are made to look like God, and more than just physical, we're made to look like God in spirit, because God is spirit. Okay, so what does this look like? So we need to look at the characteristics of who God is in order to look at who we are. So much of our identity. So now let's look at some specifics of God's characteristics, something that makes him unique to him. I mean, he's got, first thing when I was in Sunday school, I remember being taught, God is omnipotent, he is omniscient, and he is omnipresent. Those were great words. I got points for eating those words. You guys know? I remember in Sunday school. Okay, but what does that mean? So omnipotent, he's all powerful. Are we all powerful? No, that doesn't apply to us. Okay, so omniscient. Is he, omniscient. Are we all, that means he's all-knowing. Are we all-knowing? No, that part of the character doesn't apply to us. Omnipresent. He's everywhere. Are we everywhere? Boy, I wish we could be sometime, but no, it doesn't work that way. So that part doesn't apply to us. But then there's these, then there are characteristics of animals, and some which we share and some that we don't. Animals and humans both feel fear. Both experience hunger and cold. Both feel connection to like species. We could go on, but you're smart people get the idea of what I'm most interested in those characters that we as humans share with God. Perhaps that is the best definition of the image of God. So what could these characteristics be? Let me list out a few of them. So first is artistic creativity. Now, I know you can go on YouTube and find an elephant painting a picture. The elephant was taught to do that. He's not naturally creative. You don't just see elephants in the wild going, I want to paint a picture today. It just doesn't happen. Only humans create art. And we do it all the time. There is nowhere that you go where you aren't surrounded with some kind of art. If you don't believe me, look around. There's art. We like to see splashes of colors on our walls. We plant things on our property and dress with the current fashions. We can barely get out of bed before we turn on music. And sometimes we go to bed without enjoying some sort of TV show or read some sort of book or find some other part where we can escape a little bit. Our cars, our offices, our homes, our churches are all decorated with human representation of beauty. And we create sanctuaries of this beauty, of this art called museums, where you go and you must dress a certain way and silently appreciate the art around you. Almost sounds like a church. Art seems to be sacred for the human species. And can I just say, and it's something that we want to see around us. Ladies, we're pretty good about putting that artwork around us. When it comes to decorating, for the most part, I say enjoy and have at it. And I don't even have to be here. I usually trust you guys to get it done, because I know that you guys can do it, and some of you do it everywhere. Some of you do it in your bathrooms. It's just in fact, there's art in our bathroom. It's everywhere. It's something that we just can't have. If there's a space without art, we're going to put some artwork in there. I've seen art in outhouses. Yep. Because we want it everywhere. It's part of who we are. It's part of our image. Next one is time. What's the first thing you do in the morning? Look at the clock. What time am I getting up? Why is it so important from that moment? We have watches, clocks, phones, sundials. We dissect our days, count them on calendars, memorialize them with birthdays and anniversaries. We are insatiably connected to time. What other animal does that? None. No kangaroo ever puts events in a calendar. No wildebeest wears a watch. No ape makes 8 appointments. Thanks, Chuck. Even if they had the mental capacity, I doubt they would. Why? Because they have no obsession with it. It's not part. They have no obsession with planning and time management or futures. It's not in their mental DNA. The closest you even have to any type of animal paying attention to time is migration. But it's not about the time. It's more about where's my food going to be. And if I stay here, it's going to go away, so I'll die. So I must fly or I must walk. It's not about time. And I mean, if you want to prove that point, watch what happens when you have a very mild winter. Some of the birds don't go until it gets a little bit colder. So, and then you watch. So it's obviously not about time. It's not like you go, okay, August 1st, there's the geese, they're gone. You can't do that. They don't have that. However, it's hardwired into who we are. God uses time, even though He's above time, He puts characteristics in it. Though we live in the moment, we have eternity in our hearts, bringing both past and forward and the future, near and present. We live above time too, because in the end, we are not meant to simply be in this fleshy part of us, but we are meant for eternity, which meant we are meant to one day rise above time and be with God. That's what we're meant to do. Okay, communal eating. If you ever watched any type of National Geographic, you will see that while there may be times where there's feeding frenzies with fish or lions or my dogs, they're nothing like meals that people share. No animal sets a time for family meals. None of them buy special china for holidays to celebrate. They certainly don't decorate the candles with more art. This is actually more significant than you might think, because throughout the Bible, there are a lot of meals and that are listed, and every one of them is spiritually significant. The one I'm really most familiar with is Passover, the Seder meal. But even more so, if you go through and you really study biblical history, biblical culture, every single Friday night was a significant meal because it was Shabbat. And there was more significant Shabbat, but every single one was one set aside for God. Think about that. Because there's something inherently spiritual. What's the first thing that we're going to do when we get to our New Jerusalem, when we get to heaven? It's a meal. I think it's one of the few universal features that every Christian church throughout history participates in the Lord's Supper. It's one thing we agree upon, church. Because it's important. Next, I would say, is our emotions. We can see animals can feel fear. They can feel some basic emotions. But when it comes, but for the most part, a lot of it's personification of emotions. I mean, I have pets. I got home last night. We were gone for a few days, and I just watched Labbe vibrate with excitement as I was coming to get her off. I got in my chair and I called Freya to give her a little pat on the head, and she leaped into my arm, put her head on my chest, and just snuggled in, and she missed me. There was some emotions there. But when it comes down to the vast array of emotions that we have been programmed with, it fails in comparison. I want to show you something. It's something I have for counseling, and this is a deck of cards. It's called Mixed Emotions. And so we have stuff from exhausted to excited, and it's kind of, ever had a hard time kind of pinpointing what that emotion is? Well, you know what? It's because we feel such a vast array of emotions, it may not be just one. Because, and then that gets even more confusing that, young men are taught not to feel emotions sometimes. They're taught they can't cry, they can't feel anxious, they can't feel worried, and so they mask it all with something like anger, because that's an okay emotion. And so what I'm seeing on the outside, a young man throwing a chair across the room could really be a cry saying, my mom just left the house. So emotion is not just, with an animal, you know what they're feeling. But God's in depth, and God shows us how in depth He is. If you've got a he's not just a one-dimensional emotions. We serve a God of vast emotions. So I want to start off with the baseline emotion that God always has. If you have your Bibles, 1 John chapter 4, verse 7. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is God. I can stop there. I'm going to go on. And everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love. In this, love of God was manifested toward us, that God has sent his only begotten Son into the world that we might live through him. In this love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation of our sin. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has seen God any time, but if we love one another, God abides in us, and his love has been perfected in us. By this we know that we also abide in him, and he in us, because he has given us his Spirit. And we have seen and testified that the Father has sent the Son, the Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides and lives in him, and he in God. And we have known and believed that the love of God has for us. God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we have boldness in the day of our judgment. Because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. Because fear involves torment, but he who fears has not been made perfect in love. We love him because he first loved us. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he has not seen? And this is the commandment we have from him, that he who loves God must love also his brother. God is love. So here's the baseline. God is love. We can all, it's there. It's always there. But then there's sometimes we see parts of God's emotion that is still love, but it doesn't always look like the love that we think. So I'm going to jump over to Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 and 6. Here we are at 10 Commandments. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. We're back to image again. Any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. I know if you're maybe watching online, you've never heard this before, you go, whoa, we just talk about God is love, now we're talking about how he's jealous and it sounds vengeful. But it all comes from the same place. God is love. God is so, he loves us so much that that his jealousy turns into an act of love itself. You know, if you look at a lot of shows that have these love triangles, and jealousy often creates fights and anger, right? But here's what God's jealousy did. For God so loved the world that he sent his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son to this world to condemn the world, but that they may live through him. His jealous response was to send us love so that we could know him once more. And so God's multi-layered, a jealous response of love. It's not human layered there, but our emotions are part of the image that God has for us. And so, then if you then think about that, that's why he gets so jealous when he says, don't make up an image of anything over me, because he wants that love. That love that he has, that he made for us and then bought a second time. So loving and deadly, so loving this one for our love, but here's the thing about God. He's also willing to let us choose. Joshua 24:15 says, and if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He gives us that choice. I mean, it's all about an act of love. God made us to display emotion, and that's part of the image. I'm going to let us look at one more characteristic that's so important, and that's language. God uses languages to communicate his love to us. No other animal has that advantage. While there's certain apes that have been taught to sign language, or some aquatic mammals have some advanced calls, there is no animal that writes poetry. There's no birds that truly sing a song unto themselves. But that is but nothing out there tells a story, composes a play, creates a poem, writes a novel. We alone share this characteristic of God. So you take these 5 things together and something surfaces. Each of these 5 characteristics are mundane in and of themselves, a part of who we are, of our everyday micro moments, but they come to us in the bedroom, they come to us in the boardroom, at coffee shops, at a funeral home, a sporting event, a romantic meal. They are everywhere. In other words, we are like God in our most mundane moments. We are created for such a divine community. It is, in short, our created nature. For every one of us in the smallest ways, we are like God. And I'll say again, we are most like God in our most mundane moments. I'll get to one more point here before we close out today. So we've talked about how God said, let us make man in our own image. There's one more word here. Let them have dominion. God has asked us to rule over creation. This is dominion, not domination. There's a difference. We are called not to dominate creation, but to steward it, to foster it, to improve it. We are stewards, not end users. God designed the human species, the pinnacles of creation, to make something of it. It is not merely that we protect what God has made, but we continue to create. We continue creation by implementing in the community the characteristics that God has given us. Here's an incredible thought: God created the heavens and the earth. He then charged us to make a world out of the stuff that He put there, that He put at our disposal for under our care. It is our divine right and responsibility to make a world. We have cities, music, art, education, technology, transportation. These are all works of our hearts, of our hands, of our minds that extend the creation of God to become a world reflective of His good nature. Obviously, our sin nature has wasted amazingly resources on things like military, police, politics, lawyers, prisons. But without sin, none of this would be necessary. This is not a criticism of any of these occupations. They're certainly needed in Christ and can be legitimately used to curb the appetites of evil and mitigate corruption in the world. Nevertheless, imagine a world where all efforts are for positive communal development. As Christians, we have an incredible opportunity, especially at the local church, to serve our community, to model a community devoted to pure compassion, social responsibility, to love. Even the evil around us can be turned into an opportunity for us to shine a light, the pure light of God, the pure love of God in the community, reeling from the effects of brokenness. It's our responsibility as people of God to curb the natural appetites for revenge. It's ours to reduce racism. It's ours to love the outsider, to love the marginalized. It's ours to minimize the needs for prisons, for hospitals, for police. I shared last week with you in the discipleship group about Daryl Blatchley. He's in the Philippines. He was doing family circus. It's on hold right now because of COVID. But part of family circus wasn't just the spiritual part, he made sure that every single kid that walked through those doors got food every day. He made sure they had dental care, that they had proper clothing. And so that type of stuff just can't stop because you're being told you can't meet. And he's still under quarantine. Last week he was at 105, so it puts about 114, 113, I think 114 at this point. 114 days in quarantine because he's older and in the at-risk part, so he can't leave his house. But here we have his son there on the left, and that's Sandy, his wife, and they're loading up food to go out and deliver to these kids that can't come in right now. And so even in the midst of COVID, even in the midst where times seem hardest, he's saying, I want to make sure these kids get what they need. And so that's why God said, hey, did you feed the poor, the naked, the oppressed? And that's part of it because he's saying, we're not just spiritual, we're also physical too. You got to take care of that physical being so someone can hear about the spiritual. And so he's out there and he's doing that. So what differences will you make today? Remember, you are most like God in the mundane. So this doesn't have to be a colossal effort. It just needs to be you living life with the nature of God. So here's the challenge, identify one of these 5 characteristics: time, language, arts, meals, emotions, that you could use this week to create godly community. Whether that's in your family, at your work, in your team, whatever the place is, that you would bring a bit of heaven to earth. Don't race past this challenge, maybe even mark it on your calendar. Hey, I want to do this. Use that time that God has given you, that time management. Choose a time, a place, a people where you're going to exercise part of your divine nature for communal improvement. Let me give you a few ideas. Maybe at work is to write an encouraging note to your colleagues, or schedule a coaching session with some new people. At home, maybe it's schedule one more family meal than you normally would. Go around the table and ask each person to identify 3 things that they're thankful for. If it's emotions, maybe when you ask the cashier, how you doing today, you don't take the good, you go, no, how you really doing? You can take that moment to really delve in and see, are you really okay today? Are you really good? They might go, yeah, fine. But if you keep doing that, eventually they're going to say, this person really cares. And that's important. Take a friend and family to a museum or something else that's going on. Our state, we just get out and look at the museum that God has given us in our backyard. I think I've heard Joy more than ever in our marriage. We go for drives going, look how untouched this place is. It's just wilderness, and it's out there, and it's vast. And it's because God has given us, and that's the museum we live in. Remember, you are most like God in the mundane. So maybe take that friend, ride to the mountaintop on your 4-wheeler. Just look at what God has made. I know we've gone long. I just want to close this in prayer today. And just take this challenge. Don't just walk the door and forget about it. But what are you going to do with what God has given you today? So God, I pray that you help us to use the image of God that you've created, that you've placed upon us to reach those around us, whether it's at work, whether it's in our homes or with our friends, to use the different talents and part of the image of who you are to truly spread your love around. Lord, I pray that you help us to learn more and more how to live in community. Here we are, Gateway Christian Community. It's in our name. Lord, help us to grow closer together. Help us to learn how to rely on each other and trust each other and work in love. Help us to be a light in the community we live in. Help us be a light and token as we serve. Lord, show us opportunities in which we can share your love with others in our daily life. Thank you for all that you do for us. In your name. Amen. So we close this morning with the blessing. And again, it's the challenge of the blessing is You don't just hear it, you give it as well. So that the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. The Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Thanks for coming this week, church. Have a great week. Hope to see you Wednesday at Family Fellowship.